Hello, my name is Catrina Brown, and I'm the president of the Dalhousie Faculty Association. On behalf of the DFA, I'm pleased to welcome you to the latest event in our discussion series, Program Prioritization, Whose Priorities, Whose Choices. Program prioritization is having an enormous impact on faculty, staff, and students at universities across North America. In fact, one could argue that program prioritization is changing the very nature of post-secondary education, affecting academic freedom, the quality of education, and the very notion of what universities are for and about. It is a product of both the austerity agenda, which we see not only in education, but in virtually all of our public and quasi-public institutions, and the corporatization of universities. As we will soon hear from our speakers, program prioritization takes many forms. There are the formal, university-wide program prioritization initiatives that have been launched at the University of Guelph, the University of Saskatchewan, and elsewhere. There are processes that take place within specific faculties or departments, like the priority setting framework that was developed at the Faculty of Medicine here at Dalhousie. But program prioritization doesn't have to be a formal process. It can also be a general approach to priority setting and budget allocation. And this is primarily what has taken place at Dalhousie. Two faculties in particular have dealt with a declining number of tenure stream faculty and the greatest number of limited term faculty. The Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, and my own faculty, the Faculty of Health Professions. Is it a coincidence that these two faculties are less likely to attract corporate funding and private sector partnerships than, for example, the STEM disciplines, science, technology, engineering, and math? Program prioritization also goes by a lot of different names, such as differentiation framework, specialization, strategic mandate agreements. But whatever you call it, the result is frequently the same. Resource allocation that has little to do with the quality of education and a lot to do with political, administrative, or corporate priorities. It all comes down to the title of tonight's event. Whose priorities? Whose choices? Who are making the decisions that determine which programs are more valuable than others? What criteria are being applied and why? Who's involved in this discussion? What has been the impact on our universities and the students and communities they serve? And perhaps most importantly, how do we push back? To answer some of these questions, we have brought together two distinguished professors who have written and spoken extensively on program prioritization, and a Dalhousie student leader who has firsthand experience of its impact on students. Craig Heron is a professor of history at York University, specializing in Canadian labor, social, and cultural history. He has been president of the Canadian Historical Association and a board member of the Canadian Federation for the Humanities and Social Sciences. He is also one of Canada's foremost critics of program prioritization and the author of Robert Dixon, Right for Ontario, an analysis of program prioritization he wrote for the Ontario Confederation of University Faculty Associations. Len Findlay, at the end, is a professor of English at the University of Saskatchewan and chair of the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee for the Canadian Association of University Teachers. As a member of the University of Saskatchewan Faculty Association, he is intimately acquainted with the events surrounding Transform Us, the controversial program prioritization initiative that resulted in the firing of an outspoken dean and the subsequent departure of the university's president and provost. And our final speaker will be Jacqueline Skiptunis, a student of Russian Studies in the University of, at the Dalhousie Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, and Vice President Academic and External of the Dalhousie Student Union. She'll be providing a student perspective on program prioritization and provide as well a personal perspective, since languages and literature are frequently ranked as low priorities in program prioritization exercises. Each of our three panelists will speak for about 20 minutes, and then I hope we'll have a great discussion amongst us. I would also like to mention before we get started that clearly we're being videotaped, and a link will be posted on our website as soon as it's available. So we'll start with Craig. the floor is yours. And we're going to trade signs.
Just so you're not confused.
That's right.
Well, I'm very grateful to the Faculty Association for inviting me here tonight, not least because I did my PhD at this place, and it's been a while since I've been back, so it's nice to walk the streets of the city again. I also am delighted to discover in the pre-meeting discussions that there are people here from several other campuses, and all of whom I know are deeply engaged in these issues, so I think we should be able to have a good discussion. I feel a bit like an outsider coming to you with stories from the Central Canada and a few other places, but I think that there's fruit for us all to engage in what I hope will be a productive discussion later on. A specter is haunting North America, and his name is Robert Dickinson. Over the past few years, this septuagenarian U.S. citizen has cut a swath through the world of post-secondary education that few people can match. As a labor historian, I'm reminded of the work of Frederick Winslow Taylor, who 100 years ago traveled the continent marketing a new management scheme he called scientific management. The product that Bob Dickinson is flogging is, of course, known as program prioritization, a mouthful for any of us. I think it's a pernicious package that for any post-secondary institution to adopt, and I'm going to take you through some of the main concerns that his model raises. But I want to emphasize that we need to see him and his project within a larger context of new managerialism within universities. We may push him out the door on our campuses, but we need to be clear about why so many academic administrators have become Dickinsonians. Robert Dickinson has a political science degree from the University of Missouri and began a career in university administration in Arizona in 1969. From 1981 to 1991, he was president of the University of North Colorado. He also served on advisory bodies to the Arizona and Colorado state governments. That fairly narrow academic background has apparently given him the expertise to branch out into broader policy consultations on higher education. Since the early 1990s, he's moved into private consultative work and taken on administrative responsibilities with agencies on the interface between higher education and business. In 2010, Dickinson became the driving force of a new consulting agency, Academic Strategic Partners, based in Boulder, Colorado, which has been hired by several universities and colleges in the United States and a few in Canada to help undertake a process of program prioritization. This has become his consultative specialization. He's building on his record of weeding out 47 faculty, 39 of them tenured at North Colorado in 1982, a process which prompted an investigation and censure by the American Association of University Professors for almost 10 years, I'm told. He also wrote a short book published in 1999 entitled Prioritizing Academic Programs and Services, Reallocating Resources to Achieve Strategic Balance. Sure cure for insomnia. It was revised and updated in 2010 and has become, despite its insomniac qualities, has become a bestseller amongst university administrators across the continent. Dickinson and his associates have also promoted their process through a number of two-day workshops. Our provost went to one a year and a half ago. The latest ad for one of these events from last week offers a discounted registration from $1,900 to only $1,595 per person to attend, not the poor people's choice. It's worth noting that the Dickinson model is typically ignored by large research-intensive universities, except mine. None of the self-styled front-rank universities in Canada nor the Ivy League institutions in the United States have turned to Dickinson for advice. There are, however, some managerial consulting firms that are trying to market Dickinson Light, including Higher Education Strategic Associates headed by Alex Usher, and I'm told he's on the ground at St. Mary's at this very moment. So his essential message, Dickinson's essential message, is getting ever wider audiences, even though he's not necessarily delivering them all himself. So let's look more closely at what kind of snake oil this illustrious U.S. consultant is peddling. Dickinson's starting point is the financial mess that so many post-secondary institutions find themselves in. His book is blunt about what he sees as the basic problem. Quote, "The real culprit is the needless proliferation of academic programs." There you have it. Simple solution. He provides no evidence for that claim, and indeed a few pages before he admits that, quote, "institutions are spending less on instruction and an increasing share of education and related expenses are directed towards administrative support and student services." 60 pages later, he notes in passing that support staff have increased at twice the rate of instructors. But throughout the rest of the book, the possibility that a major part of the problem could be disproportionate increases in expenditures on administration is swept aside and ignored. The problem is simply what he calls, in his heroic phrase, the bloated curriculum, with too many programs. Well, arguably, I think a lot of people in the room would agree that Dickinson has got the cost problem backwards. If one decides that administration has been responsible for a disproportionate share of the rising costs in post-secondary education, then a starting point for a process of reform would be a searching inquiry into administrative growth and a serious effort to reduce those costs before turning to academic programs, which are the core of higher education. Administrators should serve academic programs, not displace them. Nor does he ever address the serious erosion of public funding for post-secondary education that's pushed so many institutions to look to these crazy new managerial solutions. For Dickinson, the main culprits for cost increase are you guys, university professors, university faculty. He peppers his text with disparaging remarks about professors, who he claims are myopically, narrowly specialized and self-interested, who are overly egalitarian, who are hopelessly mired in tradition, who never reconsider old programs, and who circle the wagons to block any change. That's just plain wrong. His claim that faculty are all incapable of and opposed to reconsidering existing programs doesn't describe the careful work that I know goes on at my institution, and I'm sure does at most of yours, that faculty councils at Senates and Senates have undertaken over the years to review, revise, and redirect academic programs. I was interested to note that last February or March, our Senate dutifully got rid of about 5 or 6 programs in the midst of a year in which we're going through this exercise, despite the argument by the guru that this doesn't ever happen. Beyond this flawed diagnosis, there are major questions to be raised about the methodology in Dickinsonian's prioritization process. He defines a program extremely narrowly. He slices academic activities into small pieces and detaches them from academic units like departments. Every degree granted by a unit, a BA, an MA, a PhD, a certificate, or whatever, is a separate and distinct program that has to be assessed on its own. The Math and Statistics Department at York had 17 of these so-called programs by this definition. This obviously makes little sense when the same people in the same unit are responsible for running all these programs. How you allocate the cost of faculty, for example, between them is absurd. And also when many people participate in programs outside their home units, particularly interdisciplinary programs. Again, something in my institution puts a lot of credit in. We simply can't be carved up like that. At some institutions, including Guelph, academic and non-academic programs were evaluated together, with the result that parking was directly compared to a doctoral program in English. More commonly in Canada, it seems there are 2 separate processes of program review, one for academic and one for non-academic administrative activities, which is what we have at York and most of the other places have as well. Guelph didn't have that. Dickinson proposes that all programs be evaluated simultaneously according to common criteria. Everybody, no matter whether you're a parking attendant or a chair of an English department, has to fill out these forms. He recommends 10 criteria, which have generally been adopted at universities that followed his model. His list is peppered with terms of private sector management: external and internal demand, inputs and outputs, program productivity, revenue generation, and opportunity analysis. Terms that pander to the new demands from provincial governments for accountability, to be sure, but also that show little understanding of what actually goes on in higher education. I, for one, refuse to see my students as output. It simply isn't the way we operate. Those 10 concepts lead to many more questions. Dickinson provides some 150 possible questions that you can ask on these, in this process of evaluation to test the programs against the overarching criteria. At York, we only had 35, but actually each of those questions had several more questions within questions. These become the template that supposedly can be applied evenly against all programs. And that generates the data on which judgments about priorities can be made. Our experience at York last spring was that this proliferation of questions became overwhelming. A 500-word limit was set for answering each of our 8 main criteria. We got moved down from 10 to 8. 8 main criteria-based questions, and we were expected to justify our program's goals, performance, and prospects in the light of a series of major policy documents on strategic planning. Massive questions, all to be answered in 500 words or less. The experience of Canadian universities where Dickinson's model has been applied suggests that a premium is placed on the finely honed literary skills of those filling in the forms, something that the Guelph report actually commented on. At York, we discovered, to our horror, that the business faculty had actually hired a professional writer to do that work. These questions are supposed to be answered in the light of data on a myriad of issues. In other words, you get the questions, but you also have some data you have to provide or are provided with. Retention rates of students, employment after graduation, and so on. For many programs, particularly in the liberal arts, such data doesn't exist in any real form, a reliable form. At York, the administration undertook to pre-populate the forms with, that's a new word I discovered. This is great. You send the data out in the forms before you get them. They're pre-populated. We are, I have to say, we've entered a whole new vocabulary as a result of this experience. They pre-populated the forms with data generated at the center. But all too often, the quality of the data turned out to be annoyingly inadequate or simply wrong. The final report of the Program Prioritization Project, PPP, at Guelph noted that the information collected was remarkably incomplete and uneven. Without decent data, how can programs be ranked other than through slippery subjective judgments? Yet we're repeatedly told in all the discussions about program prioritization that this is evidence-based decision-making. Our provost drips this term off her tongue every time she speaks about it. There is no question that the main tool for Dickinson's prioritization exercise is seriously flawed, the template that he designed, and unlikely to produce useful and comparable evidence. Incidentally, this is the point where his expertise is brought in. He doesn't just written a book, but you contract to have him come in and help you develop those questionnaires and to train the people who will work with the authors of the various questions. So seriously flawed and unlikely to produce useful and comparable results. That's what a great majority of the York people who completed the forums told the York University Faculty Association when we surveyed them earlier this summer. Information that we just released last week to the horror of the administration. The final and arguably most important step in the Dickinsonian methodology is to hand over the completed forms to an independent task force appointed by the central administration. Note that Dickinson sees little or no role for senates and faculty councils. Absolute contempt in his book for them. Indeed, he explicitly recommends that decision-making in the prioritization process should bypass established academic channels. In his judgment, it is the university government system that, quote, got the campus into program proliferation in the first place. So senates and faculty councils are responsible for curriculum bloat. A lot of us who serve on senates and faculty councils will beg to differ. Guelph had a 21-member task force divided into 4 panels that met over a 13-week period. At York, we've had 2 16-member task forces that have been meeting 3 to 4 days a week for 16 weeks this summer and fall. Our report is due at the end of October. Each member is expected to read the template and provide a score for each of the criteria questions, and thus an overall score for a program. The weighting of answers to each question varies. The former director of York's Institute for Social Research, Michael Ornstein, a very well-respected, internationally respected scholar on the world of survey research, has likened this whole process to marking an exam. We are all being graded. And in fact, interestingly, our score added up to 100, so each was much like doing a final exam in a course. If enough members agree on a score, it's accepted. Otherwise, each group discusses and reaches a consensus on the program's overall score. At the University of Saskatchewan, the huge volume of programs being considered meant that each got an average of 8 minutes and 21 seconds of deliberation, amounting to 50 seconds per criterion per program, according to the calculation of Saskatchewan economist Eric Howe, who served for a while on one of the task forces at his university. The scoring allows for comparison between programs. This is the whole point. Most commonly in the final report, the programs are clustered into 5 quintiles, from 1 to 5 or A to E or whatever, ranging from the most successful to the least. At Guelph, very few undergraduate degree-granting programs ranked in the top 20%, while intercollegiate athletic teams, food services, undergraduate residences, and the Alumni Relations Unit all scored in the top quintile. In a much-quoted contrast, parking was at the top, English was at the bottom. Once the final report is released, usually with some editorial commentary, the potential bloodbath of program cutting can begin. Throughout the process, and incidentally, despite the fact that they will try and tell you that that's not what this is all about, don't you believe it? We want to enhance and build on our strengths, but in order to do that, something else has to be cut. Throughout the process, faculty associated with particular programs are typically anxious and fearful that their own program is at risk. An unhealthy spirit of competitiveness emerges. And believe me, it was thick on the ground at York this past spring. The prioritization reports don't usually propose specific cuts, just provide the ammunition for administrators to do so. What's likely to be on the chopping block? Dickinson rightly suggests that every situation will be unique, and I'm sure you'll discover that. But he does throw in a few examples. Quote, on campus after campus, he says, some disciplines have been rated as marginal. He lists foreign languages, anthropology, geography, and geology. He also notes that, quote, recently minted programs in ethnic or gender studies or interdisciplinary programs that seek to integrate studies in area or geographic or thematic ways could also suffer. As Eric Howe from Saskatchewan has noted, innovative programs established as part of a process of social change, such as that university's Aboriginal Studies programming, will certainly be vulnerable. He also points out that this revenue-driven evaluation system is also biased towards bigger programs, which process more students, do more research, generate more funding, and so on. As he found on closer analysis of the University of Saskatchewan's Transform Us report, smaller programs were indeed disproportionately in the lower quintiles and thus more vulnerable to cuts. The authors of the Saskatchewan report referred to them disparagingly as boutique programs. Does the prioritization exercise actually help universities save much money in the end? Apparently not. At least Dickinson cites no examples of substantial savings at the many institutions that have used his services. I went on his website and thought this is the kind of thing he must report, but it's not there. Since he isn't confronting head-on what most of us believe is a central problem, administrative bloat, then it's unlikely he'll leave university presidents and provosts with much to show for all the effort. I'm convinced, and many other people involved in this process in Ontario that I've been in regular contact with are also convinced that the whole exercise is much more important for getting us all to buy into a process of budget cutting that has often already been in the cards long before the prioritization exercise has been started. This is certainly the view of the Faculty Association at Guelph. One of the most compelling critiques of the program prioritization process came from the provost at the University of Windsor last January, a man who has subsequently ascended the throne of president at Trent University, Leo Grook. He pulled no punches. The process, he wrote, quote, is frequently carried out in a way that damages morale, sometimes severely, creates conflict, and makes it more, not less, difficult to make key decisions. It tends to produce bitter suspicion, anger, and frustration rather than consensus, One does not make change easier by whipping a university into a kind of uproar that can break out as different programs fight with one another over their places in a PPP ranking. He's convinced that there are perfectly good, well-established procedures for evaluating programs, and that whatever metrics are used are already available, are needed or already available. And if any institution was whipped into an uproar by this process, it was certainly the University of Saskatchewan, where, as we'll hear more, a proposed program merger prompted one dean to publish a critique and then to lose his job. The furor brought down a provost, the university's president, and a whole slew of other people I was hearing about at dinner tonight. So it's amazing that anyone would consider doing it, given the catastrophe that resulted there. Look at the theory, methodology, and actual practice, and I think there is excellent reason to conclude that we don't need Robert Dickinson or any of his imitators, and we shouldn't welcome them on our campuses. In many ways, he has built his expertise and consulting career on a process that is deeply flawed and inappropriate, at least for Canadian universities, if not for the US versions. The decision of the University of Saskatchewan's interim president to scrap the whole process late this summer was welcome news. So what can faculty associations do? It's worth underlining that Dickinson pays almost no attention to faculty unions, probably because they're far less significant in the US, on US campuses than they are across most of Canada, where I discovered last spring that virtually every faculty association, with only a small number of exceptions now, has full-scale certified collective bargaining rights. In Ontario, U of T, Waterloo, and McMaster are the only holdouts, and they're very defensive about this. They would like to, their associations would like to be. Despite his palpable dislike of unions, there are clauses in most faculty association collective agreements that cover some of the issues he's raising, especially about the kinds of layoffs of tenured faculty that he's promoting. Let's keep our eyes on those clauses. We also need to work with our colleagues in senates to ensure that collegial decision-making is not sacrificed to this more centralized mode of managerialism. And we need to challenge the fundamentally flawed premise of the prioritization exercise that the cause of our financial problems is program bloat. We have to turn big spotlights on our universities' budgets. Let's demand they open the books in a more transparent fashion. Let's get forensic audits. Over the past year, some excellent work has been done by some faculty associations, one of the best right here at Dalhousie. We have to refocus the debate on our terms, not theirs. Finally, let's recognize soberly that Bob Dickinson will go away, but the appeal of his screwy model will not. University administrations are getting encouragement from provincial governments. The Ontario government funded these projects for any university that wanted to do it. Our university got $500,000. Encouragement from provincial governments to turn these private sector models of more centralized, more authoritarian management and to find ways to run their campuses more cheaply. Our response should be unequivocal. No thanks. Give us adequate public funding and we'll produce the high-quality teaching and research that you want at a reasonable cost. That, we should tell them, is our priority. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. Our next panelist is Len Findlay, and Len's got a PowerPoint, so he's going to sit over there.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure and privilege to be in Mi'kmaq territory the day before Treaty Days and the necessary revisiting of the 18th century friendship treaties between the Mi'kmaq and the Crown, treaties still not fully honored today. It's a pleasure also to be back on the campus of a fine university among friends and colleagues, some of whom I've known for many years. It is a pleasure to share a podium with Jacqueline and Craig, and it is a pleasure to be here to show intellectual and political solidarity with you, especially at Dalhousie. Now you are under new management. Speaking of new management, let me begin with an anecdote about your new president and chief executive officer. When CUPE 1975 went on strike at the universities of Regina and Saskatchewan, in November and December 2007, I walked the picket line around the U of S perimeter with QP members for at least a couple of hours almost every day. One especially frigid day, walking back to my office with the Faculty Association flag on my shoulder, my feet numb, my beard rigid with frozen snot and political righteousness, I saw a figure in the distance coming towards me. I must have looked like a delusional explorer, eager to plant the flag of empire at the North Pole, or at least to wave my flag seditiously while seeing the hand of Harper reaching for the Beaufort Sea. The figure approached and there was a moment of mutual recognition. Then the Vice President Administration, one Richard Florizon, for that's who it was, visibly shuddered, averted his gaze, and hurried by. I trudged on as before, then suddenly saw the hand of Franklin waving me a greeting. Not Sir John Franklin, but one Stephen Franklin, VP Research, and soon to become President of Trent University. This VP waved to me and said, "Well, Len, I see you've braved the day." Not won the day, mind you, but braved it. Stephen Franklin maintained collegial common ground with one of the administration's most vocal critics, what Peter McKinnon called the greatest enemy of the University of Saskatchewan, moi. But Vice President Florizon did not. So every time you hear Stan Rogers sing, even in 100 days of listening, think of that strange encounter and see the need for common ground, where critics of administrative policies meet with administrators and have an adult conversation. So that's the story I promised to tell. So what we have is, in a way, it's, to translate the themes, it's a new managerialism, pleading austerity and promising efficiency. And it raises urgent questions about academic control of the academic agenda and the consequences for post-secondary education in Canada, or more succinctly, that wonderful cartoon from 1947. The problems have been along. This is outdated in its gender composition. One could do a whole iconographical analysis of this, but we're turning out safe toys is what some people would still believe we ought to be doing. So I'll look for context for undertaking or resisting prioritization, context academic freedom, institutional autonomy, and collegial governance. I'll then look at current fracking priorities expressing the new extractivism in Canada's extractive economy and its increasingly extractive economy. And then I'll draw key lessons from Transform Us and the Buckingham Affair for today and tomorrow. So where is program prioritization being pursued? In universities. The idea of a university, familiar to all of us, or its equivalent entity, is ancient, pervasive, and persistent. Such entities derive in large part from two human impulses, the desire to know and the desire to control what knowledge can do or enable as evidence, commodity, or public good. The history of this interplay matters hugely in a time of state-sponsored amnesia, rapacious presentism, and the remaking of public memory, 1812ism, de-suite douzitis. I like that last one. So the tension between time and place for reflection and desire for control of the reflection's outcomes is constitutive and never goes away. Meanwhile, prioritization of programs and much else is as old as the university itself. This tension produces contingencies of inquiry and priority debated across a wide array of academic disciplines where authority uneasily resides, aptly challenged from within, and inexcusably threatened from without. The lesson of location, then. Historically, informed understanding of the current context or conjuncture is basic to sound daily operations and effective cyclical review, i.e., we need to think of the conjunctural campus, not the cloistered, unworldly, or impermeable one. The work of this thinking and action is everybody's, especially in the gerbalized and now fracked academy, where overextension fuels obedience and despair. When reporting and review occur, the traditional roles of scholars, students, administrators, and governors reveal themselves along an axis of accountability, extending and ramifying from inside the institution to its multiple outside. At such times, the institution's relative autonomy becomes apparent, as do the reasons for such autonomy and the reasons not to romanticize it, as the AUCC statement does, the 2011 new statement. So this process goes to the heart of governance. But what is that governance? Collegial governance, as we know, is a distinctive set of rights and responsibilities to set and periodically review academic priorities. Collegial governance exists in relation to external entities like governments, corporations, donors, accreditation boards, community organizations, and internal mediators of external pressure and priorities. Academic staff, administrators, and governors each represent a distinct set of interests and duties, which together complement or conflict with each other. When things are going as they should, the work that these groups do is academic, enabling, and fiduciary, respectively. When things are going badly, domain creep from above is usually the reason. I was going to say always, but I thought that might verge in unfairness. So this domain creep takes a number of forms, some of which you're struggling with. Let's call them holes in the florazone layer. For example, mandate and budgetary initiatives and expectations in the name of Campus Nova Scotia seem deeply problematic, at least to an outsider like me, and I look forward to hearing your comments. But they need to be linked to the Lukashic effect in Alberta, to Ontario's strategic management agreements, and the exemplary crisis at the University of Saskatchewan, and the list goes on. And it's globally driven in a way, parts of the administrative discourse. Institutional niche marketing is obsessive when allegedly it's a jungle out there. Home succumbs to one version of away. However, away no longer means old growth internationalism, but rather recruiting after the domestic clear cut, with a homogenizing offshore tuition revenue stream, remaking priorities, redistributing resources, and inserting consumer sovereignty light and market muscularity where collegial governance and academic reason should be. And the results of this, metastatic and contagious self-loathing and performance anxiety across these faculties and disciplines. Campus Cialis should make a fortune from it. The anxious academy means the death of pleasure and the avoidance of risk. We are all inadequate, all inauthentic, all outperformed by others. Meanwhile, an Enlightenment model like Kant's Sabere Aude, dare to know, must bow to the demands of Big Brander and the managerial cult of risk aversion. And it's being enforced federally. Thus, we live within the context of neoliberal hegemony, brass knuckles and a nimbus, bullying and social conservatism, all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. The state's communications war room and its materiel, secrecy, muzzling, spin, and smear, even of our Chief Justice. Bad inclusivity. The budget is bundling and bungling. Foreign aid is trade, and NGOs as corporate alibis and coerced allies. Economism eats value, including academic value. And the AUCC and the U15 ape the PMO and its provincial clones. We are moving from the liberal to the neoliberal arts in the managed university while enforcing campus law and order. The university's bloated war room and its materiel, opaque partnerships, directive donors, secret searches, and silencing, all in the name of the brand. The sad coercions of strategic planning, venal internationalism, imminent intellectual desertification and species loss in non-compliant and/or unprofitable places, and you know who you are. Academic economism and program prioritization eat academic values. So we're on our way towards Harper U, the state and its recalibrated collegium. Harper, stacking the Senate and fracking the nation, the politics of division. The university, stacking our senates and fracking the academy, the race for resources and repute, producing winners and losers. Harper, interpolating citizens as Fordist, suburban, Zionist, and scared. The university, interpolating good faculty as self-maximizing careerists who stay on message, bad faculty as targets for de-skilling or worse. Tough on thought crime. Thank you, George Orwell. So what do we have here? Is it collegial or managerial autonomy? Why are so many disciplines seen as safely contained by accreditation agencies? Why are the arts and sciences viewed and treated as an ungovernable, unprofitable rump, instead of as the trusted guardians of academic quality, integrity, and value? Institutional autonomy as a priority. Such autonomy ought always to function in the service of academic freedom as envisaged by CAUT and entrenched in collective agreements, not in university policy or the AUCC's new statement on academic freedom. Otherwise, managerial-driven institutional autonomy becomes internally limiting and externally abject, both sovereign and for sale, with autocratic academic managers doubling as shills for corporate and governmental priorities. Hollow autonomy means you. Hollow autonomy escapes collegial oversight while pleading financial exigency or peerless vision. There's a pun in there. The chance to shrink or eliminate disciplines while prioritizing bureaucratic bloat where the blubber hits the road, qua academic leadership and panoptic capacity. Cultures of surveillance are everywhere. Meanwhile, academic freedom is constrained, violated by exclusion, termination, casualization, and precariousness. And austerity U is fracked. That is more and more subject to an extractive model tied to a reductive theory of value. Universities' residual educational potential is pressured by consultant slurry and corporate toxins whose names and nature are withheld for commercial reasons. How many secret agreements are there on your campuses? And who are the beneficiaries of such secrecy? With little heed to knowledge ecologies that have developed complex connections and interdependencies over time, and with little sign of the honor of the crown and the duty to consult. So what are the lessons from my particular experience at the University of Saskatchewan? Well, when a new president tries to set a new tone, it is still too often a top-down process. The new tone usually takes a visionary and a managerial path, both potentially obstructed by institutional memory and collegial capacity, and let's hope by a collective agreement. A potential legitimacy crisis is averted or worsened by making the president's vision ours, internalizing the conditions of our current administration. Through town hall meetings, targeted consultations, alleged rethinking, and remorseless spin. A potential legitimate crisis is also averted, or worsened, by making collegial governance work for rather than with the president. Our new president's predecessor had McKinnon, the new president here is the now departed and unlamented Bush Visionary. But McKinnon, as her predecessor, had established the tradition of a court culture, coerced collegium, and compliant board while he was drafting the AUCC statement on academic freedom. Our new president built on this legacy in new ways, showing inadvertently how conjunctural analysis is key to faculty resistance. The increasingly coerced collegium rubber-stamped presidential decisions and proposals their mandate, resources, and priorities. Meanwhile, academic stewardship underwent a forced migration from sites of collegial governance to the text of the collective agreement. At the same time, the need to camouflage or sanitize an essentially managerial process and choices became ever clearer. In response, academic staff exposed the program prioritization sham on 4 main grounds, and this will overlap with Craig's analysis. First, the intellectual mediocrity and anti-faculty bias of the source text in Dickinson. Second, the shady pseudo-collegial circumstances behind its adoption for the prioritization process. Third, the appalling pedagogy of assigning a single text in a complex area and insisting it be read only one way, that is, uncritically. And fourth, the duping of naive faculty who tried to save the U of S from a never demonstrated financial ruin. But evidence is not enough in Harperland. The administration was unabashed and undeterred by questioning and criticism. When Dickinson was discredited, it was claimed, wrongly, that his trial by templates had been substantially modified to suit the U of S. Absolute baloney. It had been adopted almost verbatim. Motions of non-confidence in this process were ignored in the case of the students and soundly defeated in the case of my motion in University Council. Academic omerta, something I've been discussing with Peter McInnes, academic omerta extended far beyond the silence of the deans. Declaiming and litigating for a presidential veto on the award of tenure produced a major chill among probationary appointees. Many tenured faculty took their cue from their deans or from their overworked and reluctantly compliant department heads. The prioritization fix was in, resistance muted, and hubris, if not exultation, was audible in the big house. But that hubris led to catastrophic overreach in the case of Buckingham's dismissal. Faculty and student resistance was revisited, revalued, and intensified. Good internationalism kicked in the form of global outrage at the security escort off campus at dawn and the arbitrary instant stripping of Buckingham's professorial tenure. In Greek tragedy, hubris precedes nemesis and ate, and administrators ignore at their peril what student leaders think. Administrators also dismiss at their peril what they take to be the whining of, quote, from a consultant, Alex Usher, tired and entitled malcontents and deadwood. That would be us. If not, bad things can happen to them. As the firestorm intensified, the provost fell on his integrated planner, taking one for the senior team. Then the president was dismissed mysteriously without cause, while like the provost, retaining her tenure. Then the chair of the Board of Governors announced her decision to stand down this fall, but only after defending prioritization and the decision to take the Sims arbitration to the judicial review. We won a great victory on that judicial review, but the university is now considering appealing that decision. How stupid is that, to quote myself from an earlier piece I wrote? Amidst all of this, we had ceremonial pathos. At spring convocation, with the Buckingham elephant in the auditorium, and me and my academic togs on the platform prominently displaying this, it should be the Academic Freedom in Conflict book, with the man with the duct tape over his mouth. I carried that onto the podium and displayed it prominently for the TV cameras and for the particular pleasure of my graduating students, all of whom have always admired my text selection. So there was the blight of convocation, and nobody mentioned, even though the program had to be reprinted because there was no longer a provost, and the provost had been in the program, so there was a kind of textual emendation to cover over a serious crime. And then we went on. And then in a separate ceremony soon after, we had the muted and awkward installation of the interim president, further evidence of a wounded institution and intrusive provincial government, when all the deans trooped silently onto the platform for the presidential installation. We all thought, the silence of the deans. I mean, it was all still there, and they all wanted to be somewhere else. And then another head rolled, the Associate VP Human Resources, and we are not done yet. The provost's senior assistant, fondly known as Binder Girl, who would come along and tell us what was in the binder and coming our way very shortly. She has gone to spend more time with her family. and there are at least another 2 in process. Meanwhile, it became known that budgetary crisis that ostensibly triggered this had somehow vanished more thoroughly than support staff dismissals and an incentivized faculty retirement plan could so readily have accomplished. Famine had become feast as rapidly and mysteriously as feast had become famine. But then, what to do in the big house? Okay, they seem to have thought, let's use this embarrassingly good financial news to bribe the faculty. We'll use bribery and burial as our 2 responses to this situation. Bribe the faculty and bury the truth. 7.25% on scale over 3 years, significant catch-up for over 400 women faculty, and we'll abandon, sort of, the presidential veto on the new contract so we don't become known as rube you or suck up you or even fuck up you. Now that really is a good effort at turning the page and transforming us. Lessons. Vigilance and resistance are never futile, no matter how discouraging and intimidating things may seem in the short run. Do not give up on collegial governance. It's a crucial site in which to press for transparency and to determine academic priorities. Avoid the divide and rule trap and the self-fracking it enables, and build solidarity with students and other unions to promote the public good. Here's my T-shirt. It's the academy, stupid. Our staff associations and collegial governance have the resources to make the academic argument most effectively. We have institutional memory, unrivaled understanding of publicly funded post-secondary education. We have unrivaled access to faculty analysis of conditions on the ground across our institutions. We know the folly of picking winners and intellectual overmanagement. So it's the academy, stupid. Get together, make these arguments effectively, and we will push this back. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Len. And our final panelist is Jacqueline Skiptunis.
I can set this. Is this on? Yeah? Okay. I don't have a very thorough presentation to make, and as it's probably been mentioned, I'm here just to give a student perspective on things. I'm very self-conscious at this point that my frustration and anger will belie my inexperience in this type of situation. To start off, I came to Dalhousie in 2007, and I think that says a lot about probably both my dedication to my studies and maybe how well I've done throughout it. Well enough to stay, dedicated enough to stay, poor enough to stay for 7 years. So I started off at the school, this is interesting, coming here to take linguistics. And I should have realized when that first happened, I came in the first year that linguistics actually got cut at the university, so I couldn't do it. It wasn't an option, I'd switched to something else, didn't think much of it, figured that that was how university went. Switch forward to 2011, having switched universities and traveled around a bit, I studied abroad a few times. I've been to about 6 universities at this point, decided to come back to Dalhousie because for whatever reason there is something alluring about it and it holds real importance to me to return. I came into Russian studies. I had a fantastic professor, her name was Shannon Spasova. She was my language professor, she was my literature professor, and I didn't realize this, but after my first year at university, my second year, I started really speaking with her because as a student, you forge relationships with your profs. She was on something called, she was an LTA, so you have a 10-month contract. I didn't know that that existed, and I found out in the second year that she had arrived the same year I had in 2007, and ever since 2007 had been on these limited term contracts. So 10 months of the year she had a job, 2 months of the year she waited for the university to tell her whether or not she did the next year. In 2011 or 12, she decided that it was enough. The limited term contract kept her, because she was also from the United States, from being able to purchase a home, from being able to really get settled in the place that she considered home at that point. And I think that struck a chord with me because I'm also from the US. So I've come here as an international student, looking eventually to make Canada my home, and hearing that someone that I respected and cared for so much couldn't do it was pretty shattering. To find out that part of the reason that was because my university didn't think that what this woman taught and that the people she taught were valuable enough to them to keep the program running and to fund it properly was even more damaging. I don't think that at any point the administration assumes that students are going to side with professors. There's this constant, we're placed in opposition perpetually. Every time that we mention, I think it's been mentioned at least twice tonight, that when there are funding issues, 97% of our funding goes to faculty. Ask your faculty. As students, I think this is going to be the bulk of my speaking tonight, just to tell you that we understand that that makes a lot of sense. I'm quite happy that 97% of the budget goes to my faculty and doesn't go to a number of other things. Like very snarkily suggested that they buy a couple extra thousand staples and maybe amend the percentages in some way. But 97% makes sense to me. That losing that professor, being put in that situation, and then realizing that it wasn't just one professor, it was a number of them, made it into a bit of a mission for me. So after that, the ways that students go about this is through our societies, through other students. Joined a society, helped rebuild the society for my department, went on into the faculty society, and then actually got access to all the things that were really happening. I found out that Russian was not the only one, that one of my best friends taking Italian, same thing. And it's not just a question of you don't have access to your favorite professor, it's a matter of I'm in my 4th year of French and there are no courses for me to take. They all got canceled because there aren't enough students taking them. And apparently if you don't have 8 to 10 students in a class, it's not something worth teaching because we don't make enough money off of it. That's not a way to show your students that you value them. And that is the word that I've heard used constantly for students, that we're valued. We prefer the term respected occasionally. I brought that up recently at a government roundtable. They said that we particularly value our international students. And of course you do. I pay $20,000 a year to go here. I hope you value me in some way. I also hope you respect me enough to give me the opportunity to actually finish my degree at the university that I've been trying to finish it at now for at least 7 years. Program prioritization isn't something that the university will ever admit, at least here, to having implemented. They haven't. It's the same response that I get every time I talk about tenure with them. We're not against tenure. We're all for tenure. Of course, what are you talking about? We have no control over whether or not people get tenured, which makes absolutely no sense. The same way it makes absolutely no sense to say that you're not choosing programs to cut and choosing programs to fund. Sorry. I think the most important thing to say as a student is that when they talk about the value of degree, when they talk about coming to Dal and how they're going to make Dal a very attractive university to students, what they're not really taking into consideration is that the things that differentiate the university are things that they're cutting. They're very proud of the smaller programs. They're very proud that they teach Russian. They're the only universities in Canada that teaches Russian. There aren't many universities in Canada relative to the United States, I understand that, but even fewer that have these very specific subjects. It's not, as the word I've heard is market reactive, that we're meant to be market reactive. And as students, I will say this, we're supposed to be critical. We are critical. We're better at it than I think a lot of people seem to give us credit for. I've looked into it, and I found that the job of a university historically is not to be market reactive. That's actually not what universities do. It's very, very frustrating to hear that we're supposed to be market reactive. The job of a university, from my understanding, is to actually create the market. The university forges a market, and it's doing quite the opposite and sort of shooting yourself in the foot to take all of these programs, cut them, and try and catch on to other research and other things that people already think are really popular and really profitable. Sorry, I've lost where I am. In trying to chase a market and in cutting all of these, in cutting programs, in denying students access to the courses that they need and that they desire, they're actually devaluing our university degree. We've had this over the past year. It's kind of the thing that the students at this university really picked up on. You can talk to us about lowering our tuition fees. It's crucial. Access is one of the biggest things that we chase in this university. It's one of the biggest things that we like to support. Access to university, which is something that they've kind of tried to tag on with and say that we're getting you into university, we're getting people jobs that would never have had these jobs. These newer people are being university educated, more people are being university educated. My frustration with that is, firstly, it's too damn expensive. You're not actually giving many people access. Secondly, you're giving them access to a university that's no longer an actual university. I don't think that the value of your university degree is going to be the same when you only teach, let's say, 4 main subjects and you cut all of these different programs and you reduce access to information. That's not a university. I don't care how big your access is, what you're actually doing then is cutting access to information. The value of your degree is degraded. That's something that students really get. Last year we had an issue with our library. We didn't have enough library funding. They just said, and we've been told that we misunderstood this. This is not actually what happened. There was funding. There was just it's just crossing in words. They weren't buying books. All you have to do is tell that to students. That's a very simple thing. It kind of proves that we are here to study. We're not just here to pay and have fun. When you take away our access to information, when you basically cut academic freedom, we pay attention and we notice. So students are very aware of the value of their degree. They're very aware that program prioritization and that cutting these smaller programs and limiting opportunities to learn are not something that are in our best interests. I think that might be the most important thing that I have to say. My biggest interest here is really answering questions that anyone might have for students. It's just very important to me to say that students do stand with our faculty and with our staff. It's not the way that our administration has tried to play it. We don't think our administration is what was tired?
Tired and entitled.
Tired and entitled. Not tired and entitled, rather people that we can actually learn something from, and we hope they're people we can learn something from, and people we can trust, and I think that tenure is something that guarantees that. And that's why, as students, we've really been pushing for that, and that's actually become a concern of ours. We understand the importance, we understand that politics play into it, and we understand that academic freedom ensures the value in our own degrees, and that by doing that, that by standing with our faculty and our staff, we're ensuring that for ourselves. So that's where we've been at Dal lately. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline, and it's very important that we have a student representative on this panel, so really appreciate you being here. So our panelists have raised obviously some extremely important ideas, and it's now your turn. So anybody who has any comments or questions can go to the microphone down there in the middle of the room, and everybody would be happy to engage in conversation.
Hi, Darren Abramson, FAS Philosophy. So I keep getting emails in which I'm told that our new president is helping us to move more to a provost model of governance. And I'm embarrassed to say that I don't either know what that means or how it's different from how we're operating now. So I was wondering if maybe you could so this is kind of a governance issue that's very concrete and specific to Dalhousie, but I was hoping maybe we could speculate together about what that means in the context of program prioritization. Thanks.
If I could first, at Saskatchewan, just as Richard Florzon was about to rejoin us, we had a VP academic, Michael Atkinson, who was the evil genius behind the relentless planning and the punitive process, whose meaning is not improvement, the meaning is compliance. As long as you comply with the process, that keeps a particular power structure in place. Michael Atkinson argued for the change in his job status from Vice President Academic to Vice President Academic and Provost. The bill of goods we were sold in order to facilitate such a shift in title and nomenclature was that it meant that with the overarching responsibilities of the provost, the academic as a cluster of values and principles on which to act and make decisions, it was centering the academic within the vice president academic and provost. That it was dignifying, recognizing, making more visible the academic in the university's self-representation. What in actual fact it meant, it was a cover for the colonizing and the ingestion of the academic by the administrator. That is, it was exactly the reverse. Rather than dignifying the academic, it was putting it in a place where it could be more readily absorbed, co-opted, and then dispersed. So I think that the changes of name, just as in the name, I mean, our university is like a strip mall under rotating ownership. Now, things change their names all the time as people buy and sell them. and what's happening in terms of the naming of parks and buildings in the university, that the academic onomasticon also has another level up at the higher managerial and a higher managerial cohort. So the notion of the provost, the shift seems innocent, sober, maybe even a little dull. But read beneath, read for the subtext, and read for the redistribution, which involves the imperilment of the academic by the administrator.
I agree with that completely. I was on the search committee for our first provost in the move away from that, and the president explained why he was moving this direction. It wasn't even discussed. It was just he announced it by bringing someone from the University of Western Ontario who was a provost to explain what difference it made. And the main argument was that this would elevate this person to take on some of the responsibilities the president had previously occupied, give the president more time to deal with larger external related issues, government relations and such like. And this internal person, because academic was still attached to them, would therefore be more likely to be dominant over finance and other things. Because they first amongst equals and all that. Everyone had to report through the provost in one way or another. In practice, that is undoubtedly at least partly true, but in practice it's also meant an enormous increase in power in that office of the provost and a practice of trying to get more and more activities moved through there. This last week we heard that at the Senate that the old Division of Continuing Education will be moved into the provost's office rather than be under the oversight of Senate any longer. Which is, we got a fight on our hands about this, but a great deal of power is involved in that name change that you should be well aware of, and new managerial practices. I mean, it's the cover for the new managerialism, which is what Len was saying in other words.
Mark Lamoureux, I'm the union president at St. Mary's University, so president of St. Mary's University Faculty Union. Just like you, Craig and Len, St. Mary's, I've now seen the seven-headed beast that came from the deepest pit of hell, called program prioritization, and it came with its little demon called Alex Usher. So, and last Friday we had a town hall meeting where basically the program prioritization was introduced to the faculty. I mean, they had the audacity to ask and plead for our assistance and help in cannibalizing our own academic program. Please help us cutting you. So what I would like to know is that, well, what we're right now thinking about doing to resist this first is to adopt what I would call a nonviolent academic resistance, disobedience, and not comply with anything they ask of us that has to do with this program prioritization. Today, an email was sent to all faculty and asking to fill a survey. Essentially 4 or 5, that seems benign, innocuous questions, but they're all linked to, what have you identified in terms of resources that can be reallocated? What have you identified opportunities where we could change things, So my take on that would be to ask, in fact, right now I already ask all faculty, until we have had a town hall meeting of the academy, don't fill the survey. Don't fill the survey until you hear from us, okay? That's the first thing we've asked. But it could very well be that don't do anything about the program prioritization ever from now on. And so my question to the both of you is that at your own institution, was that something that you've tried? To ask the faculty, stop, don't participate, don't do anything about it. Because the information they're going to get from the academy, from the faculty, can be used against us. It's like, whatever you say can be held against you in a court of law. And I think, that's probably the worst thing to do is to participate with the administration in that process. So that's a question for Craig and Len. Now, the other thing is that, and that's where maybe Jacqueline could get involved, is that I'm not sure if here at Dalhousie if you actually went into a program prioritization or if it's been discussed. But I mean, a large question is that have students been involved in this process where faculty association have gone to the student association to have a, to seek alliance and work together to defeat the program prioritization? Is that something being done at your institution? And Jacqueline, have you had any contact with the Dal Faculty Association to see if this comes up or if it's here? How are we going to deal with that? Because I think it's one thing, when I think about the university, certainly we think about the academy, but we have to think about the students as well, because the university is I see that as the relationship between the teacher and the students. That's what matters. The administration, they're there to aid and facilitate the process, but no more than that. So I think we need to have the students involved in there, and I don't know if you've done that, if it was successful, and how to do it if you did. So I'm looking forward to hearing your answers, because we're right in the middle of that. Strangely, this program prioritization at St. Mary's is coming within 1 year of our negotiation. It's just a strange coincidence. I don't want to mean anything about that, but that's what it is. Thank you.
We talked about this possibility a lot at York. Should we just boycott it all? Should we just say, don't do it? And there are two reasons why we ended up not being able to go that route. One was you'll find a lot of faculty who support it. That they buy into this notion that it's a fair process of assessment. Now, as I think I may have said to you or someone tonight anyway, that one of the disadvantages that the employers have now in bringing this forward is there's so much on the record about how bad it is, and that you can establish a pretty good case for how it's methodologically inadequate, how it doesn't solve the problems that that face universities and so on. The other issue was a legal one. If you as a faculty association counsel insubordination, you can be in big trouble. And that was the advice we got. So we backed away from it. I think the lesson that we learned from Wilfrid Laurier, and that was taken up by one of our faculties, is to try and get resolutions passed through legitimate decision-making collegial bodies that reject it, that say this is completely unnecessary and will not solve any of our problems, and for all the intellectual reasons is not anything to put any trust in. It's a lot of effort to get that, and Brock was the first to try and do it in some ways, because when the president tried to impose this, the Senate passed a resolution saying, no, we're taking it over ourselves. That took an enormous mobilization, phone calls going on for weeks and so on to get people there. The final thing I should say in relation to the question that you threw to the other panelist is that we fell down on this in Senate, where this was mostly talked about for the first half of last year before we took more direct involvement in it with as a faculty association. The students sat silent, and we didn't actually engage with them nearly enough. Just last week, however, there was a forum organized by the Students' Federation that was, they were very keenly interested, and we had somebody there talking, and it's extremely important. Len is absolutely right, and I keep forgetting her name. Jacqueline, sorry. Jacqueline is as well. I keep wanting to call her Catrina. That we need to build those alliances. But on the first issue, I don't know what Len thinks about it. He's got a more legal background than I have, but it's a very dicey area.
Yeah. I think it's good to remember first what the it in question is that we're trying to deal with. Yeah. And one important feature of this it is its pervasiveness across the country. I live in what is currently known as a half province, a boom province. Things have never been better than they are in Saskatchewan and Alberta. But the same strategy, the same impetus is evident in every province and in every institution. So the arguments for austerity don't really fly here, because in places of relative and no doubt temporary abundance, this is being pursued with an equal zeal. Now, with the key thing here is that our association, there was our local association, there is CAUT, and I'm sitting in both and shuttling between the two. And then there is the council, which is the coerced collegium, It's been handpicked, it's stacked with administrators, and they're all scripted and whipped on particular kinds of votes. So the outcome is really never in doubt. Now, in that situation, one of the things you have to do is not, the temptation is to go to the collective agreement as your only instrument. And then, of course, it's much harder for you to shed the role of employee/beneficiary of particular kinds of situations and make the academic argument. But your identity is not exhausted by your association membership. You're also an active member of the collegium. And so you've got to reclaim the collegium, the collegial governance body, because it is the avenue towards legitimation. And if you can turn things back, our former president's Vision 2025 was taken up was passed almost without emendation. When it was in our council, the previous council, which was ready to ratify this, were ready to vote, and I pointed out that one of the bullets in the document, which had been workshopped everywhere and scarcely modified, it remained the same text as she had produced in the previous year. I pointed out that one of the bullets said, the university will ensure that all employees reflect the values of the institution in their public statements. The values of the institution as determined by whom? So what you have is a discursive tyranny. Everybody's going to be scripted. And this was, and that bullet was exactly compatible with the doctrine of the silence of the deans, right? And so if I hadn't stood up and the president instantly came to the mic and said, good point, and I will withdraw that bullet. And I said, well, I'm not done yet. This is a comprehensively flawed document. There are other things. We cannot ratify this. But the stacked council ratified it. Now at the last council meeting, it was rescinded because we had elections. People tried to reclaim the collegium. They were so appalled by what happened, by the grotesque overreach, because they came that close to winning. They came that close to the absolute implementation of a program prioritization. It was only the last act of hubris, the last overreach, and the breaking of the silence of the deans by Buckingham. No hero him, by the way, but it's the principle that matters, that led to the furore. So they were that close, they can get that close, they were that close, they can get that close again. So you need the two instruments. You need, and what our association did was to constantly exhort participation in collegial process. That is, reclaim the collegium, because that's where the legitimacy lies. And people had to stand. I vowed I would never darken the door of council again. I did, I was there, and I witnessed a key moment, and it's a key moment in the political resistance to this kind of process. The undergraduate, the Students' Union executive, voted a unanimous vote of non-confidence in the transform process because they said they'd been treated like children. They had only been included belatedly and reluctantly in the consultation process that was known as Transformos, and they had been infantilized throughout. So the president of the Students' Union comes to the podium in the faculty council and says, we have voted unanimously non-confidence in the Transformos process. The room explodes. We witness what is known as the cleft collegium. One half of the room, faculty and students, burst down to thunderous applause. The other side of the room, heavily administrative, sits in stony, awkward, and increasingly incriminating silence. That is, they performed the silence of the dean, they performed the silence and fear and anxiety, because the boss is in the room, of the whipped and scripted cohort. And we saw at that moment, and people took that, and the observers too, it was a packed auditorium. The observers, as well as those who had the right to vote, took that away as a kind of encapsulation, an iconic moment. And they took that and they went off, they talked about it, the media were very interested, and we found that if we are perceived unfairly, I think, as a privileged guild, our students are seen within the frame of the future and the frame of fairness. If the students are getting the short end, if the students are getting the shaft, the public takes notice. And at that moment, it seemed they were being treated like their children, and they had had the guts and the gumption to push back. And the students, in fact, led the resistance movement that led to the whole series of heads rolling in such an agreeable way in the following year. And then come to the answer. Can you imagine in your institution the provost going, the president going, the chair of the board going, the VP HR going, them all going? I mean, this is the most enticing and seductive version of a purge in my whole failure of a lifetime. I've lost so many battles, but it was the student moment within the collegial governance context that helped to legitimate and to supplement, and then to go far beyond mere supplementing of the faculty association urging participation, because the faculty association couldn't encourage people to act in a particular way on the academic agenda of the university.
I think one thing that I've definitely noticed before, and this is a criticism of the faculty association, is that I've often attended meetings of faculty meetings just because I'm curious how the administration gets some of the most intelligent and capable people in Canada to do things that I find to be just impressively stupid. And it's interesting because you sit in those meetings as a student, totally intimidated, not knowing what to say, knowing that anything you do say is going to be could be grammatically nitpicked or just torn apart at any instant. And yet you have these wildly charismatic administrators come in, say absolutely nothing of substance, pass a motion, and you have all of these people that in the day-to-day you trust and respect so much to give you the absolute truth about something and the most comprehensive information about something, just watching it. Sometimes getting frustrated, and that's a pretty inspiring moment, but it's just incredible that just repeatedly passes through. And I don't say that without an understanding of you're going to lose your job, you're not going to get tagged. I'm there, and I do have an understanding of that, but I think that's a really important thing to kind of keep in mind. As students, we take our cues from you very often. We do have our own minds, we do take initiative, but it actually means something, and I do think that the faculty is in a privileged position and that they have access to so many thousands of students who respect you just by the merit of you being the person in front of the room with the information. As far as students getting involved in things, I think maybe one of the benefits of something like program prioritization is that it's pushed to the limits on what students will accept. A lot of students actually do come to university because they care about a certain subject. You're finally out of high school and you finally get to study something really cool that you actually want to study. Let's say Welsh, that might be a personal example. Nobody gives a damn about actually teaching something like that. And it's frustrating to see people that spent their entire lives, or a good portion of their lives, studying that, caring about that, and then professing that to a group of people, kind of treated like crap. That's pretty galvanizing. That was galvanizing for me, and it's been galvanizing for the student body at this university, finally. I think last year was one of the first years I was told that students actually stood up and took action against the administration, or more on behalf of themselves, based on the fact that they hadn't been treated fairly academically. Yeah. As you said, infantilized is a very good word. Taken opportunities away from them and just force them to a position where what they're paying for and what they're here for isn't being given to them. So I think that students and faculty working together is really important. I do think that faculty maybe underestimates their ability to inspire students towards action a lot of the time. And I would like to see that kind of working together going forward a bit more.
I have to go, so I'd just like to say thank you very much for your participation. It's going to help St. Mary's very much. Thank you. You're welcome. Thanks.
I don't know if I have a question anymore. My name is Jason Hatzelman, the Department of English here at Dalhousie.
I want to pick up on what Jacqueline was just saying and lead into a statement about some of the things that the students here are doing at Dal and the way they're leading the faculty rather than the other way around. But I also want to talk about the value of directed anger because that's what I'm hearing about on the panel. So the first person I'm going to direct my anger at, and I'm afraid to say his name, so if you say it too many times he appears in a puff of smoke, Alex Usher. I went to school with him in undergrad. And if I remember correctly, his claim to fame in undergrad at McGill was that he managed to pass a motion to get the Student Union building named after William Shatner. So he should have quit when he was ahead. Second point of anger, I was lucky enough to be invited recently to the Royal Society of Canada Atlantic Symposium on what is the business, in scare quotes, of the university. And it was a fabulous event. There were some great speakers. Mine and Lynn and Marjorie's colleague Noreen Golfman talked about the Neoliberal Academy and the effects it's having in much the same way as we're hearing tonight. But I was also through the rabbit hole a little bit. Len's favorite friend and ally McKinnon was there. He says the biggest problem with the university is unions, of course, yep. And the infection of the trade unions. That's the infection of trade unionism at the university, he said. And Dalhousie's favorite friend and ally, Bill Black, the president of our Board of Governors, or chair of our Board of Governors, was there. Not speaking for the Board of Governors, of course, because when he does, he gets slapped around a little bit. The reason I bring this up is because prioritization is also working at a macro level here in Nova Scotia. That is between universities. We've already seen this happen with NASCAD. We're going to start to see it happen with more universities. Dalhousie is becoming the vampire imperialist of Nova Scotia, sucking up all of the spare campuses that are lying around the province. This is, in some ways, speaks to the divide and conquer strategy on a provincial level. The more we allow that to happen, the more we allow prioritization at the university, not just in the university level, the more we will see the access that Jacqueline talked about being denied. I don't know how many people saw, I think it was in the Inside Higher Ed, or no, it was The Guardian, I saw it in first, of course, about Germany just scrapping its new tuition fees. And one of the arguments made was that every university has to be funded equally in order to offer equal programs so that everybody has access to as much knowledge as possible. And that's what we're seeing being attacked here in Nova Scotia by people like Bill Black, who doesn't want a university in Nova Scotia, but he does want brands in the universities. So that's something that we need to get angry about. It was a little bit like being through the rabbit hole, like I said, listening to this. Bill Black also said that tenure is to blame for contract academic staff. Because we have tenure and because we have collective agreements, we're all getting paid too much. And therefore, the university has to hire people on contract. This is another divide and conquer strategy that we need to be aware of. So, I'm speaking in a calm voice, but I'm really very angry. But I want to point towards some hope and some directed anger. And I'm going to reference my colleague, student here at Dal, J.D. Hutton. There was a group formed here at Dal 2 years ago? About 2 years ago? Called, 2 years-ish ago, called Dal United. And it was a group of faculty, students, and staff working together to try to hold the administration accountable. And JD has a stack of the Bill of Rights that were put together by that organization, including a demand, if I think it made it in, including a demand for a forensic accounting of the university. And this sort of allied operation within and between our universities, working with ANSUT, the Nova Scotia Union collective, these are the ways that we can fight back against this. So I guess if I have a question, it's, is there other places we need to direct our anger in productive ways? But I will turn things over to JD if he wants to talk about the Dal United movement a little bit.
I wasn't in the line, but since I've been called out, I'll say something. Yeah. Yeah, just Dal United was something that myself and some other friends within the student union started a couple years ago, because we realized that it actually started after the last almost strike by the DFA a couple of years ago, when the DFA reached out to students within the Student Union as well as other groups like the Nova Scotia Public Interest Research Group, which students organized through. And they were looking for strike in the support. And like a lot of us thinking, okay, that makes sense, support the faculty. But this was the first time we'd ever talked to them. We had no idea what the faculty were doing and where they were the rest of the time, except when they needed our help. And even if it's legitimate, sure, I'm happy to help you out. We did Valentine's cards for the Board of Governors saying, you know, they're passive-aggressive Valentines. We would love it. We love it when you cut our faculty. We love it when you raise tuition fees. So that was sort of the first time we started doing some student-professor solidarity work. But a friend of mine named Aaron Beale got elected to the Student Union on a progressive platform. And we decided that one of the things we start doing is forging ties between the student union, faculty unions, and staff unions. Because we're all in this together. Your working conditions, our learning conditions, we either sink or swim together. So Dal United was a stab at something for the first time, where we could just get in the same room for the first time in a very long time and produce something that we all agree on. And so this little document, the Bill of Rights, is quite humble, but it's something. And so we'd like to keep up that work. Thanks.
Well done.
In August at York, a meeting was called for the second time in a year, but this time more successfully, of all the campus unions that negotiate with York University, the Undergraduate Student Federation, and the Graduate Students Association. And at that meeting, there was such energy for doing exactly what was just described that we've created the Cross-Campus Alliance, which meets monthly and has done a lot of information sharing. The work we started to do on the university budget was shared with the other unions, which are in negotiations right now, and we're not for another year. And most interestingly, in some ways, on the there's an event in the first or second week of classes that's called York Fest, in which every group on campus gets to set up a table. It's all run by the Student Federation. And as a result of this Cross-Campus Alliance, the Federation gave us a booth, and we designed a pamphlet that the Student Federation produced for us with photographs of a day in the life of a student moving around the campus in different places they would be encountering people. And they were labeled with which union or whatever student association that you would be encountering at that point. So they were actually reminded that every time they saw a janitor or interacted with a secretary or dealt with us in a classroom or whatever, that there was a very early beginning. But the table event was really quite interesting. We had lots of swag to give away, so we drew people over. But there were conversations. They'd never heard of us in most cases. And the swag was the sort of way to get the conversation started, but it was so anyway, it's a very promising start in a similar way. I really like to see the document that you were talking about a minute ago. Briefly, to go back to the comment that was made about the relationship between prioritization and what goes on provincially. In Ontario, it's overt. The provincial government has a program called differentiation, which is trying to impose. And the strategic management agreements that universities had to engage in last winter and spring signed 3-year agreements between each institution and the provincial government in which they establish what their priorities are, and the government agrees on that, was the first step down that road. The provincial government was quite clear that they saw internal prioritization as an extension of that, and that's why they were willing to fund as much of it as they could. So it's there's no question in anyone's mind, and where I come from, that they're closely linked, and we try and talk about them in the same breath. I probably should have mentioned that earlier, but you're quite right.
We had instant, because of the extremity of the situation, an academic integrity group, which was drawn from off-campus, from alumni, students, all coming together. So it's a new coalitions of concern. Academic integrity was one of them, and the value of the degrees that the students are paying increasingly more for. And the other was something, because the university used US as a suffix, and they said that illustrious is us, prestigious is us, and of course we immediately countered with nauseous and cretinous. But after we realized that you need more than mockery in order to win the day usually, and more than evidence too, And now we have a group called Defend Us, and it is very inclusive. They sent delegations to the Board of Governors. They met with our acting interim president, and that's another instrument. That's a kind of public concern. That's a new nonce body that isn't with the association and isn't with the faculty council. So the supplementation of fora and instruments means that if you are not making headway here, you can use another avenue. And you need to be adroit, you need to be versatile, and you need to keep other people in the conversation.
Do we have time, Catrina?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, indeed.
My name's Brenda Bagan. I'm from the Faculty of Health Professions here at Dal. In some ways, it feels to me the situations that you're describing at York and Saskatchewan feel easier in a sense in that there's actually a target there. There was a process, a named formal process. And I've just turned 50. I've got 15 more years here at the university. And I kind of thank my lucky stars every day I got tenure already. And I'm kind of hoping I can keep my head down and no one will notice me. And I'll kind of fly under the radar long enough that I can stay until I retire. Because nothing I care about matters anymore here. So, and it's not just at the university. So I don't know where Dal's going to go with the prioritizing processes. But it's already happened to us through the kind of 1,000 cuts processes. So what we're seeing is the faculty in places like Russian, Italian, philosophy that are all sessionals or term contract. And at the national level, it started with CIHR and SSHRC. When Harper said that SSHRC had to have that same mandate of you have to show immediate impact on Canadians, preferably economic impact on Canadians, so that actual research that's about intellectual stimulation and insight in the world doesn't matter anymore. So it's at the federal level, and locally, it's things like, I was at a full-day workshop within the Faculty of Health Professions on our research strategic plan. It was a brilliant meeting. We had round tables. Everyone sat around and talked about how in our faculty, health professions, we care as much about teaching future health professionals as we do about doing research. Everyone said that. At the end of the day, we had a panel of experts come to talk to us about how to increase our research in our faculty. Martha Crago said to us, you're all under accreditation criteria. What you need to do is learn the bare minimum you can do to pass your accreditation standards and teach to that. If you're teaching beyond the bare minimum to get accredited, you're wasting your time. That time should be put into your research. You're failing yourselves as university professors if you're not doing that. So we had all just said what we cared about was balance. Yes, do good research. We all care about that. But we want it to be balanced with good teaching. And we were told it didn't matter if we did good teaching or not. So that's at the faculty level. I'm on our faculty's research committee. The other day we started talking about research metrics because we know what's coming down at our university is how can we prove that we deserve to continue to exist? We don't have the same clout medicine has in terms of dollars brought in, so how can we have some other count that we'll be able to market ourselves through? And that's what we're doing right now in my faculty. Most recently, in the past year, we were told we had to come up with criteria to justify getting CDI, our pay increments that happen every year and always have at Dalhousie. The university is now asking us to quantify what it is we do to deserve our pay raises every year. DFA has encouraged all of us to resist this, but my faculty has gone ahead and made lists of what we're supposed to prove every year. Some of us in our schools are refusing to resist, choosing to resist it, but that's the quantifying of our existence. And frankly, I mean, whether we go through a formal process or not, this is what's happening here. We're having to account for our existence in ways that don't make any sense. It's not about learning, it's not about teaching, it's not about intellectual insight in the world, what universities we're supposed to be here for. And frankly, I don't know what else we do. I don't know how you fight that stuff, the kind of stuff that makes me just want to keep under the radar and hope I can retire.
I think that you do have targets. You have a target, you have several targets. I'll give you a couple of examples. So Martha was having a power breakfast in the Lord Nelson yesterday as I was trying to force down my scrambled eggs in her vicinity. And I couldn't quite eavesdrop because espionage is not beneath me by any means. And I would have been eager to share any tidbit I got. But, you know, she is part of this team. One of the places you can go, you can first always read the text. If you look at the 5 values in the installation address of Richard Florizon, you will find the word partnership. Now, the word partnership is code for not bringing people together, but bringing one set of people to heal. And the people who are being brought to heal are the faculty who are having their modes and inclinations of inquiry scripted for them by funding sources. So you read what your dear leader says, and you read that with maximum hostility, skepticism, and a hermeneutic of suspicion. And when you get through that, you'll find how much of what our leadership across the country say is derivative. It's all commercial, corporate boilerplate with a Dairy Queen topping of pseudo-academic lingo just to make it look legit. So you've got to look at what's being, read what's there. If this is a real expression, sincere expression of value by someone who will claim to represent you and the interests of Dalhousie University, then read it and read it very carefully. I think also you have to, one of the things that's happening, a crucial and symptomatic conflation that's happening across the country at the moment, is the conflation of secrecy and confidentiality. We respect confidentiality all the time. That is different from the administrative imposition of silence on the deans, who are supposed to represent the interests of the departments and colleagues and the students. So that particular conflation needs to be got at. The other thing is, if you keep silent, what that does is ratify the notion that other people do, if you're tenured, that people do have the right to punish you. Now, they do have the right to, they buy the loyalty of the big beneficiaries. And one of the problems with prioritization is that those who think they will profit from it are all for it. So there is no singularity, there's no unanimous community of any sort in this. But you can act with your full authority, exercise your tenure. I think if you're in precarious work, it's a more difficult situation. But this is what tenure is for. Tenure is coupled to academic freedom, and CAUT's committee is called Academic Freedom and Tenure because of that very coupling. So you have tenure. It's not the freedom to be academic. It is to be a fearless tribune, to call things as you see them, and to do so without fear of reprisal. Because if there is a culture of fear, it is profoundly damaging to the institution and profoundly dismaying to the general public. They see the Canadian Academy in Harperland, the place of muzzling and menace. They see the Canadian Academy as the last redoubt of deliberate democracy and candid disclosure of concern or enthusiasm. If we don't model that, and Jacqueline nailed it, that is, our students do model themselves in our practice. So if we allow timidity or careerism or just vague discomfort to keep us from saying what we have to say, then it's a self-impoverishing project. And we will lose, and maybe in that situation, we deserve to lose because we have forfeited the public trust by not living up to it and acting as though we are tenured. Now, there are all sorts of quiet iniquities that go on within the university, score settling, backstabbing, obstructing, and so on. Those go on all the time. But when one looks at the core values of the institution, when one looks at the nature, the public mission of the publicly funded university, you have to speak up. And when people who are not accustomed to speaking up, break the silence, it can move an argument, it can sway a room. If X is talking and X is endlessly, pathologically circumspect, but there is X saying something straight and speaking truth to power, then the power of that example can mobilize in ways that would really surprise you. So I think, as I said to Catrina, we have to recover our academic swagger, as well as use our swag prudently. We've got to recover. This place belongs to us. We are the university. The pretension to represent us is simply an administrative delusion. We've got to call it for that, and we've got to act accordingly.
I just want to follow that up by saying that at least at this university, it's important to know that you have the support of a student body. I don't think there's ever been a time or a point at which the student union has been so in support of faculty action against things like program prioritization. So.
I think also, I really understand the dilemma that you just posed, because I think that our administrations blew it in taking on this kind of high-profile project, because they could have done a lot of the same things without doing it, and they've politicized a lot of people who would otherwise not have been there. But there are a lot of small battles to start with, and they can sometimes explode in your face, in their faces, and they don't necessarily. The totalizing sense of this is just out of control, and I can't do anything is there on a daily basis. I mean, I'm active in the Faculty Association in the Senate. I feel it all the time, and I feel, as Len has for years, I think it's often you're just beating your head against a brick wall. But every so often, other voice comes along that has just been so angered by what's been going on, and the power of that voice is amazing. And it could be over a very small issue, and the fight over that small issue can actually be worth it, because after all, there are so many of those small issues.
Time for more?
Yep.
Okay. My name's Brian Noble. I'm on Senate here at Dalhousie, and I just wanted to first of all thank all of you for your commitment and dedication and hard work and staying with it for all the years. And Jackie, 7 years is a long time. I think that's pretty incredible. But it's kind of interesting is that I've also noticed that sometimes the student organizers that end up being able to give the most are the ones who have had to sacrifice part of their academic training to give their time to activism, to holding office and so forth. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's a piece of what you've done. I'm on Senate, and I really want to pick up on the point that Len, you offered, which is reclaiming the collegium. I think that's crucial. And I want to pick up on the point that you just said, which is we are the university. In that same panel that Jason Haslam was talking about with Bill Black, whose family is the family behind Manulife Corporation, right? They merged in 2004 and had a $14.5 billion asset corporation, which they sold off to Hancock Corporation in the United States. That's the guy who's on our board of directors, and he does get smacked around, but boy, does he have a lot to say. Yeah. And then Peter McKinnon was the second person. The third person was Rosie Redfield, a biologist from the University of British Columbia, and she said the same thing. She said, "We are the university. We're the university." She said, "This is what I've always thought in all my years in being in academy, is that we're the university." And all this stuff you're talking about, including Senate administration, all the parking, all that stuff is all the machinery that's wrapped around us to ensure that we do this. Now, the collegium, for me, includes the students. I think classically, in the old Oxfordian, Oxbridge model, the collegium was the professoriate, the senior professors of the university who made up the Senate. And as recently as 25 years ago at Dalhousie, the Senate was all of the full professors on campus. So one of the things that I and a group of senators have been trying to do is, and Marjorie Stone here is among them, is trying to bring together senators who are prepared to challenge the administration and the agendas put forward in the very cumbersome process. Jackie's seen this, she's on Senate, the very cumbersome process of following tight agendas in the Senate meetings and so forth. When I had been on Senate and fought the Senate on constitutional changes where they specifically wrote out relations between the Senate and the Dalhousie Faculty Association. I tried to fight that, and I was the lone voice because everybody had been caught in a spirit of complacency and not actually willing to do that. Now I'm gone back to Senate. I've decided to go back to Senate, and now I'm speaking at Senate. And one of the first things they did when we came back to Senate is they sent out, this was bizarre, they sent a letter to each of us who are new on Senate again. And they said, welcome to Senate. Tell us your preference for which committee you want to go on to. Right? Because they were going to simply plop us onto committees. So a number of us got together and we said, we will not go on any committees because we want to dedicate ourselves to the work of the plenum. So that's the autonomy of the plenum, those who vote in Senate, and that's precisely what we're doing. So we're trying to meet together, we're trying to bring student senators and a group of like-minded senators from across campus to advance what I call a democratic academic forum for conversation and action. And what I hope is that what we can do is see how to coordinate in a much more fruitful manner with the DFA, with the student associations, including the graduate student associations, and slowly build the collegium back up again. And I wonder as well, what are the models from other universities, from York? I think that your universities have had a much longer, stronger, activist, autonomous kind of approach to the academy that perhaps than Dalhousie has. Dalhousie has slipped a lot in the years. I think that's what Brenda was pointing to. But what are the models there, and how do we connect the models at our university with the models that you have in your university? The university here has developed in elaborate governance systems, but what do we have in terms of structures to answer the anti-governance systems and structures that we have to answer all of that? And I think the collegium, and starting from something like we are the university, us and the students together, that's the moment of synergy that's so important for building what academic life is about, is where it is. But what have you got to share, and how can we connect the dots amongst us so that we can have a stronger sense of solidarity around this?
The history of our Senate is somewhat unique, but everyone's is, I'm sure. In 1997, we were on strike for 8 weeks, and in the middle of, 2/3 of the way through the strike, they decided they would launch the summer program without us. And Senate became the major battleground for resisting that, and we managed to grind their efforts to a halt. And it was a politicization of Senate that had never happened before. In fact, up to that point, Senate had been the bedrock of anti-unionism on campus. From that point on, and for several years after, it was the rallying point for campus-wide protest, essentially, in an academic forum, and a real resurgence of collegial energy. There were revisions to the way in which the Senate ran and its membership. I was on Senate for 3 years at the turn of the millennium, and then I came back about 5 years ago. And in that interim, there had been a revision of membership and procedures. For example, you can only speak once in Senate now on any issue, unless you go into committee of the whole. But what became clear last year was that the students had been organized into a caucus for ages, and they always met regularly. The great bulk of administrators seemed to have the whip over their back on a regular basis, and even if they hadn't, they knew where to look to see how they should vote. We were the disorganized ones. So out of the crisis that blew up around trying to initially we tried to get Senate more heavily involved in the shaping of this crazy process that we've been through, the prioritization process, and we've lost most of those battles. But one of the products was that we've now created a faculty caucus that meets the hour before Senate. Of a potential, I think, of about 70 or 80, 70 people, I think, maybe, 75. Well, the most we ever had is, I think, 35. But in practice, like the last time we had, I think, a dozen. It was a bad time because some of the new senators who were keenly interested in coming were supposed to be at an orientation session for being new senators and whatnot, and it was the first part of the school year. But my sense is that if you can get 15 people together before a Senate meeting to talk about the main issues that are there and who's going to say what, and just to coordinate some of that response, It's a low level of organization compared to what has happened in Saskatchewan for sure, but it's absolutely essential because increasingly we're being silenced. People go in there and say nothing. And some of the ones who feel that the weight most and the contradictions worst are the department chairs. Almost all our department chairs are senators. And they're caught in this bind. They know they're faculty members, they're member of the faculty association, but they're also, the dean is there, right? All the deans are there. And they need some sense of, and they're usually outraged by what's going on. They just need some push to get themselves in the momentum. And believe me, the prioritization exercise got most of them really up and going. Mind you, we organized one really intense response, the biggest meeting we had. There all sorts of people have been talking about how upset we were. They were. We just lost the sound. Anyway, they were very upset.
We're going to cut the power next.
And when we got to Senate, most of the people who had volunteered to say something were silent. So the two of us who usually did most of the talking ended up doing it. So it's a little bit like the days 30 and 40 years ago in the labor movement when women were just getting more active and they had to be, to get together to teach each other how to have the courage to stand up and say something. Because faculty members live in fear. Even people who are 55 years old and are full professors are afraid of speaking out. So.
I would just organize it around the notion of realization and resolve. And the realization that is key to the reanimation and the reclamation of collegial governance. The realization is that when they win, they lose. When under Peter McKinnon's regime, you look at the minutes of our faculty council, and for more than a year, he would make his presidential statement and there would be no questions. Now, try teaching a class in which you never get any questions. And the classroom's a good instructive analogy with what's happened. So they win, they manage the outcome of every vote, and the votes in their predictability lose their legitimacy. When you realize that when they win, they lose, and you try to communicate that to them, then that induces some awareness in them. So you use that realization to mobilize the faculty for robust participation in collegial governance, and you induce in them the sense that what they've been doing, you've seen through it, that the emperor has no clothes. In terms of the resolve, you have to resolve to use every instrument available. If you look at the orientation process for new senators or new members of faculty councils across Canada, you see that a key conflation in the middle of it is that the exhortation to civility, behind which means that collegiality is actually congeniality, that we have to make nice all the time. So that particular conflation is in there. And if you look, I was oriented when I returned to faculty council, and we go along and we're infantilized once again, and we're told, we have to be respectful. And the idea is, where can you make your contribution to our version of the project? That is, you're not contributing critical collegial capacity to enrich the sense of possibilities and the productive attainment. What you're along as a rubber stamp. So the first thing we did was hold up this orientation document in the process, and we got a little USB and a pencil at the end of it. I felt about 5 years old again at the end of it. So we got our administration swag, and then they presumed we were all on side. And then, of course, when I got up and began causing trouble in my new and reinvigorated role in council, and others began to do the same, suddenly we were back in the agora. We weren't inside the fortress or the bunker, and it became the process once again, like a good classroom, in which it's the productive performance of difference, not the extraction of unanimity. That's the nature of the project. And then when you go in, so we now caucus as well. We had our own slate of nominees. We recruited. And we've got people who either we went for directed anger, some of the some new voices, but some old voices, old directors of old anger, and some new people as well. And suddenly the conversation changed. And suddenly the university administration were shocked by the votes. They were shocked by the debate, its length, its quality, its vigor, and the fact that they couldn't control it. They couldn't manage the outcome. And suddenly you realize this is about control, the exposure of its limitations, and then the push back against those borders. And so realizing that when they win, they lose, and realizing also we are the university and we instantiate that in particular kinds of ways within collegial fora.
Should I say something? Did you want to?
I'm just going to say that one of my first Senate meetings was the orientation this year, and Brian saying something in the meeting and actually questioning the process of the administration, questioning decisions. We had student senators looking at each other and going, "Oh God, we can talk." Like they say things. No one expected it to happen. It was just an orientation, and to actually go in and have people making comments on what was happening to us was just absolutely rattling in the best way. So again, it's that when you're put in that position where you have people around you that you consider your superiors immediately doing things like questioning what's happening, we're much more inclined to. We have a caucus meeting now, and we talk pretty regularly about what can we go in there, what can we talk about. They're actually behind us on this one. We're not just going to be coming off, because it's our stereotype as like the whiny students or something. Mm-hmm. So that means a lot to us.
Are there any other questions? I'm just wondering how much energy people have left at this point. Doesn't appear as though there are. Are there any other comments that anybody would like to make?
I'm leaving on the 5:40 flight in the morning.
So he would like to leave.
And I'll be emceeing an academic freedom free-for-all with the president of the Association of American University Professors, Jim Turk. So we're keeping on the stranglehold. Just because we've had multiple heads rolling, we have them on the back foot. We have the authenticity. They have exemplified the inauthenticity. We listened to leadership drivel for years, and then the leadership screwed up big time. We burnished the university brand at enormous expense for years, and then we inflicted a massive black eye on the brand. So we are in charge, and we have recovered our swagger, at least for a day or two. Please recover yours.
So just a couple other things. So thank you all for coming and for your comments, and thank you to Craig and Len and Jacqueline for participating in the event. There is literature at the back if people would like to take any, and there are more events that will be coming up in this discussion series, so keep your eyes open for those. And there'll be a forum at the end of October, probably October 29th, on fair employment with a focus on contract academic staff. So if people are interested in that, we'll have another discussion. So thank you all.